Hello again, everybody. This is Derek, and I am coming back at you with another Wargaming and miniature video. In today's video, what we're going to be doing is placing these decals on these Macedonian foot companions, and we're going to be using the Little Big Men decal. This looks like it's decal sheet number 2 for the Macedonians. Little Big Men have their decals separated by manufacturer of like what miniature company that you're going to be placing the decal onto, because one company's shield might be shaped differently from another company's shield. So make sure you get the right shield or the right company. This one fits Old Glory 15s, and that's what these figures are. They are Old Glory 15s. Now I'm only going to do these 8 figures right here for the tutorial, just so you can see exactly how it's done. What you're going to need to do, well, first of all, let's say there is decal paper on the back. There's decal paper. The decal is back is facing you. So this is not the side of the decal that will be exposed to the naked eye on the decal. It's actually on the back side. This is a see-through decal. So what I'm doing is I'm seeing the back side. I know it's a tricky concept, but bear with me. And then on top of that, you can see the shine. I don't know if you can see the shine actually, but there is a fairly hard plastic protective film on the decal. So what you'll need to do is get a fairly nice sharp set of scissors and you will need to cut the decal out close, if not perfectly close, to the actual image. Just cut through the entire thing until you get your decals cut out. Now I recommend scissors as opposed to an X-Acto knife because of the hard plastic film that's on the top that you have to cut through. I find that I have a lot more control on cutting circles with a scissor than I do with my X-Acto knife. Okay, so let me cut these 8 decals out, and then I'll be right back. Now be aware that these decals are very small because I'm doing 15 millimeters. Little Big Men makes decals that are multiple different scales, but these 15 millimeter decals are fairly small. So just be careful not to lose them or drop them or whatever. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, so I got one of these decals cut out. What I'm going to do in this, and you can tell it's not sure if you can tell, but it's not a perfect circle. It's close enough. All right, let me cut the rest of these out, and then I'll be right back. Okay, and while I cut the last one out, I want to bring up this subject that I find kind of hysterical. I hear these young model builders saying when they're talking about decals, they say decal. And I'm like, it's not a decal, it's a decal. I don't know how the language has changed over the years, but it's been decal for 60 years for me. Okay, so now I've got these cut out. All right, now the surface of the model that you're going to be putting your decal on needs to be painted white. Okay, you paint it white because remember that decal is transparent and you want the colors on the decal to shine through perfectly for your model. And if you have any other color on the shield, then it'll corrupt the color of the decal. Now, something I wanted to point out on these Macedonian foot companions is that they have these shields, and you can see how heavily they are domed, right? They are seriously domed. So to assist with a domed miniature shield, turn your decals face down, and then with your X-Acto knife on the back side, you're going to need to score a star shape. So I draw one line across that way, and I draw another line that way, and another line that way. So I made a little asterisk. Now you might not be able to see that. Okay, hopefully you can see how you might not be able to see it, but it's pizza shaped, right? I got 3 pizza cuts. That's going to allow for the decal to form around the domed shield. Okay, so let me... And now when you do this score, it's not a cut. I'm not cutting all the way through. I'm just kind of half cutting the paper. Just giving it a... You understand. It's scored, it's not cut. Just dragging the knife across, allowing it to cut the surface of the paper, but not all the way through. Okay, let me score these and I'll be right back. Now you can place these decals on a domed model without scoring them in the back. It'll just be harder to get it to lay flat on the shield. This way it's a lot easier. We take one of the decals, right? Okay, we got one of the decals. And remember that plastic film that was protecting the decal? Well, what it is actually doing is protecting the sticky side of the decal. The decal actually has it's self-adhesive. So I just go through here with my finger and I kind of try to find the plastic. And once I find the plastic, I peel it off. So now I've got the plastic disc that I can throw in the trash. And there's a lot of static electricity. It wants to stick to you and your clothes and drop on the floor and everything else. So just be careful with that. And then you take the decal, which you can see it's sticking to my finger, which is perfectly fine. Center it on your shield or wherever you would place it, wherever you want it. That's your decal. I'm trying to center it on the shield. And then what I do is I use my thumb to press and I kind of roll my thumb around to remember this is a domed shield, and you can see that it's still not edge to edge. Don't stress that part. That part is perfectly fine. Okay, let's show you that one more time. Go to the decal. Whoops. Be careful. Find the plastic. Whoa, what just happened? Okay, that plastic like came off no problem. But where'd my decal go? All right, and then we center it on the shield where you want it to go. Right? Then I use my thumb again because it's really meaty and fleshy. So I go in and kind of just get the bottom edge of the shield. And at this point, it's not too terribly hard to adjust your decal if it moves or gets adjusted. Okay, so right now we've got 2 decals stuck onto the shield. Let me do the rest and then I'll be right back. Okay, so all of the paper, or I should say all the decals, are now pressed up against the shields, but you can see there is a little bit of a gap and it's not perfectly flat, but that's okay because we're not finished yet. Okay, now before we move on to the next step, I just want to touch on a couple of things. There's a couple of different ways that you can prepare the shield or whatever. It could be the side of a tank or whatever. There's a couple of different ways you can prepare the target point of your decal. One way is to use microsol and microset, where you can. This is a 2-part solution. You've got the blue bottle. I think it's blue that you painted onto whatever the surface is, and it prepares the paint to receive decals. I don't think that's really necessary with these little Big Men decals. You can take the extra step and do it if you want, but I don't think it's necessary. And there is another thing you could do is you can use a clear gloss. This is a clear gloss, and that's what I've done to these shields. These shields were initially painted white, and then I used the clear gloss to give it a smooth surface for the decal to sit on. Because I'm going to go in afterwards and use a dull coat anyway. But that's what I used. I used a clear gloss by Model Master. And you can use any white paint, but since I'm painting bulk, I just used Apple Barrel. Okay, for this next step, I recommend having a paper towel available, and I use a soft bristle brush. It doesn't matter. This is going to be used to transfer water from my palette into or onto the decal. So I usually take some water and I put it in the palette just to give me something to transfer. And I'll show you what I mean. All right, so here we go. We take the brush, we get it wet, and then I wet the paper down on from the back of the decal, right? And then I use my Mark I thumb applicator and I press the decal. Now that the paper is soft, it'll actually conform to the shield, and because I put those score marks, this is where it applies. This is where it makes it easier, and then you notice the paper pops right off and you got your decal. Let me do that one more time. Water. Soak the paper. Use your Mark I applicator. This is my Mark I applicator, actually. This must be my Mark II applicator. Press it in around the edges, and then I leave it. It doesn't need to come off like the first one did. And then I just work my way down the line, getting them wet, applying the pressure so that it would form fit to whatever surface you're applying your decal to. Let me do the rest and I'll be right back. All right, we're doing the last one on this stick. Get the paper wet. Press with my application tool. And I am kind of rolling my thumb around to make sure I get all edges, and then the paper just pops off. But as you can see on these other ones, it didn't pop off. I wasn't trying to get it to pop off. Okay, so this one is partially off. There you go. And if it doesn't just come off super easy, what I do is I just apply a little bit more water and let it soak in. And that's like any other traditional water slide decal. These are not water slide decals. These are, I don't know what they're called, but they're the little big men. They're the sticky decals. Okay, and that popped right off, and that one popped right off, and that pops right off. They say it usually takes about 20 to 30 seconds for them to come off. Okay, well, this is where the paper towel comes into effect. I use the paper towel now because these decals are wet still, right? There's a little water residue. I go in and I dry the decal with the paper towel, but I'm doing the exact same thing I've done. This is the third time I've done this. I'm pressing down on all edges with the paper towel, kind of pressing it down into the, if it had like ridges or if it wasn't a perfectly smooth transfer point, then pressure might get the decal to go down inside of some, because you might, let's say you put a star on the back of a tank and you're putting it over the engine compartment where there's a grill. Applying pressure will get the decal to kind of go down into the grill, but it's not going to be perfect, and I'll tell you what the next step is. Okay, so these decals are on the shield. Now, to finish it out a little bit, or I should say, to finish it, there's a couple of different things you can do, but what I do is I use the part 2 of the microsol, and I use a different brush, not the one that has the water on it. and then I completely coat the decal with this microsol. Um, be careful with the microsol because it is a solvent. It will melt your decal. That's why I'm using a soft brush. Um, Now, the initial, these little pigment decals are very durable. Okay, they're they're not going to just fall apart on you like some decals that you might have seen. Um, so the initial coating of this microsol, you're probably okay. But if you leave it on there for a minute and you try to go back over it with a brush, be careful because the decal paper is probably soft, because what's happening is it's melting it into the model. So let it dry completely before you try a second coat of microsol. But sometimes you'll need 2 or 3 coats. On these shields, I don't. That's not going to be necessary because they're perfectly smooth. But if it was, like I said, something that had rough or ridges or creases or like sword gashes or whatever, then you would have to maybe use the microsol a couple of different times. Okay, now I don't use a paper towel or anything to let that, to soak it up. I just let the microsol dry on the decal. Okay, I'm going to let this dry and we'll be back to it in just a second. Another way you can finish your decal is by going back over it with the clear coat, and it'll basically seal the decal into your model. That's another step that you can take to get the decal to be protected, and that will also help prevent the decal from shrinking over time. They say that 10 years later these decals might shrink up, but I plan to seal my miniatures once I'm done painting them, so I don't need to do that right now. So I'm going to go through and kind of give you an example of some of these previous decals that I had finished. All right, so let me go ahead and just show you some of the decals while we wait for that black Macedonian star to dry. Here's another set of decals I did earlier, and you can see how they fit nicely on the dome of the shield, right? All right, and here we go with some red Macedonian stars. And this was primarily red with a white star. If I was to try to, you got to make sure that you put it on top of a white background. Just remember that. Or that white star would not come through because remember it's transparent. And then the red would look all crazy if it didn't have the white behind it. These are hypaspids. Their shields are shaped a little bit differently. They're a little bit flatter, but they still have a little bit of a dome to them, and you can see the decals got a kind of a gloss to it. All right, these black guys should be finished. Let's take a look at these. Yeah, you see how it bends around that dome. That scoring is what allowed that to happen. If you didn't score it, you could still do it, but you might see air bubbles or wrinkles. Now, I'm probably not going to leave the shields white like that. I'm going to color the shields either bronze or white or whatever the color needs to be. And if you're interested in seeing the finished results of these, and if you're interested in seeing the finished results of these Macedonian pike phalanxes and these hypaspids, stay tuned to my channel because I will be doing a Ancients update, and when these get painted, I will show them off and show them in their completed state. So if you're interested to see how the decals turn out in the Army, please come back and check out that video. All right, well, thank you for coming out and checking out this tutorial on how to use the little big men decals on a domed shield. And I will see you in the next video.